Welcome to Gen Z Money, episode 41.
And I went away traveling by myself. So I went to kind of Australia and Thailand. And a bit of that I used from money that I'd earned from my jobs, from money that I'd earned in that business that I'd set up. And I think that taught me a lot as well about kind of financial independence. I'd gone halfway across the world on my own, and I knew that I needed to be careful with money. I needed to learn how to budget, because if I ran out of money, there was no one there to help me. So that was very much about having that experience, really having fun and going to all these different places, but also knowing kind of when to track your money and when to know when to stop.
Even if my jokes aren't funny, my tongue tied up on it, and I don't need to speak a single word, 'cause you got me holding.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Gen Z Money Podcast, where we turn financial peace to your reality. I'm your host, James Bowman, and today's guest from way across the pond, I bring on Matilda, who is a Millennial Saver on Instagram. Matilda currently lives in the UK, and we break down her personal money story, and we break down all of the similarities between what's going on in Europe with finances, and also comparing that to the United States. She talks about a whole bunch of products that aren't exactly like what we have in the United States, but I was able to find a whole bunch of comparisons to compare it to keep it very relevant to what we do here at Gen Z, which is American finances. With that being said, guys, what you're going to realize in this is that we talked to Brandon in Canada. We talked to Matilda in the UK, and personal finance is kind of similar regardless of where you go. So you guys are still going to get a whole bunch of great knowledge, and you're going to get another perspective on this whole personal finance things, even from someone who is on the almost other side of the world. But without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get into my interview with Matilda. What's going on, Matilda? Welcome to the Gen Z Money Podcast. How are you doing on this afternoon?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome. I'm doing awesome. You are our first guest streaming all the way from the UK. So I am super duper excited to not only hear your money story, your upbringing, but also kind of compare it to the US and some of the things that we have ongoing over here. So I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your time today.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and an honor to be the UK guest.
Absolutely. So I always like to start straight from the beginning, right? Let's go 10-year-old Matilda. Let's say you were in, fourth grade, fifth grade. How was money talked about and viewed in your household as you grew up?
So I guess, to be honest, money wasn't really talked about much. It was more about the behaviors that my parents taught me. And I think that's probably the first lesson that I had was we weren't really that open about money, and it was kind of perceived as if you talked about like the price of things, it was quite rude. And I think that was a behavior, and maybe that's very kind of much in the UK. And obviously, as I've got older, we have a very open conversation between myself and my parents about money. But looking back at it, there was a lot of things that they taught me, and they probably taught me without even realizing. And I was raised in an environment where money was comfortable. We were a middle class family. And actually looking back at it, I probably didn't realize how comfortable we were. We were very much, I had what I needed, but we didn't have what we wanted. And other items were considered a luxury. So one of these were, a lot of my friends had Xboxes and Nintendos, and my parents were like, we won't buy that for you. If you want an Xbox, if you want a Nintendo, you go out and you earn that money yourself. So very much those luxury items were for us to attain. And we're definitely taught a lot about kind of budgeting and allowances and the value of money along my childhood. So when I was 12 years old, my grandpa took me to the bank and I opened my first bank account. and I got a little kind of red HSBC money box, which I loved. And I just loved putting in money and like watching it grow and then taking it to the bank. And when I was about 12 to 14, we were given pocket money. So we had an allowance, and, you know, if that went, you weren't allowed anything else. And then at 14, the pocket money stopped, and that was the age that you could get a job in the UK. So if you wanted any more money, you were to go out and earn it. So my first job was a pot washer. So not a very glamorous job, but I loved it because I loved that financial freedom that it gave me. I loved getting the little pay packets on a Sunday and walking home along the trail from where I was working at a cafe, and putting it in that red money box and then taking it to the bank.
That's wow. Okay, let's dissect that a little bit because that's awesome. So first of all, actually, I'm gonna skip that first question I got because that's a good one for later. So your parents were middle class. They didn't give you everything that you guys ever wanted. They would tell you no, and I think it's a pretty healthy relationship. And to tell you like if you want these luxuries, you have to work for it. You open your first bank account at 12, and from 12 to 14, you get an allowance from your parents.
Yeah.
And at 14, they're like, okay, now it's time for you to get out there and get your own job. So that's a little bit earlier, in the United States. I think 16 is the age you can work. But of course, if it's with family, you can work younger. And there's all the stipulations I don't want to get into. But at 14, you said you were a pot washer, which I assume is like a dishwasher for maybe a restaurant.
Yes. Yeah. And it was £4.50 an hour. I remember that.
I mean, looking back, that's not too bad. I mean, I don't know the conversion rate, but at 14, that's a pretty good wage to earn.
Yes. Oh, I thought it was like insane amounts. Thought I was absolutely rolling in it.
Okay, so you start working at the age of 14. You get paid on Sunday. You go home, deposit into your little bank deposit thing, and then you go and take it to the bank. And so at 14, you're already doing what we're doing at 18, essentially, with making a paycheck, putting it in the bank and stuff like that. So, and you already said your parents didn't, just give you everything you wanted. A lot of things you had to save up and earn yourself. So what was your relationship with money at that point? Were you saving it? Were you spending most of it? I'm sure investing was kind of in the back burner of your head. Like, what was your relationship with money at that time, if you can remember?
So I was definitely saving it. What I would do is I would keep a little bit for fun money. So when I wasn't working, I might go to the swimming pool with friends, and then we'd go for a cafe, like to have a brownie after. That would be like the fun of the weekend at that age. And then I'd say maybe 70% of it I was putting away in savings. And I was very motivated by watching that money grow. Like, I loved nothing more than going on the internet and logging into HSBC and seeing, kind of how I was doing. And yeah, saving has always been a big thing, and it definitely started at a young age.
Oh, that's so awesome to hear. And so at 14, you're like, okay, I'm gonna save 70% and spend 30%. That is unheard of. Let's be honest. Like that is such a bizarre concept, at least for us in the United States. Like a lot of children, it's very hard to teach a child delayed gratification. And so it seems like you learned that at a very young age. So let's continue with the story. Like, you're 14, you're saving most of your income. You're still enjoying yourself,
Yeah.
going to cafes and going to the pool, and you now have fun money and you have savings money. Where did that take you between 14 and 18? Did you continue working, or how did that go?
Yeah, so I continued working. I had a few jobs. When I was 16, so I was in sixth form, which is the last 2 years of school before university. I had a small online business, so I set up myself, and I learned a lot then in terms of how finances work, the profit that I was making when I was buying the ingredients, the materials to make this jewelry. How much was I spending? What did I need to sell it for? What was the margins? And that taught me an awful lot. And I was able to save quite a bit through that. I made quite a bit. So I was selling the jewelry online in shops around where I lived. And then I was also going to kind of markets and like Christmas markets especially. And from that, I had a year between sixth form and university. And I went away traveling by myself. So I went to kind of Australia and Thailand. And a bit of that I used from money that I'd earned from my jobs, from money that I'd earned in that business that I'd set up. And I think that taught me a lot as well about kind of financial independence. I'd gone halfway across the world on my own, and I knew that I needed to be careful with money. I needed to learn how to budget, because if I ran out of money, there was no one there to help me. So that was very much about having that experience, really having fun and going to all these different places, but also knowing kind of when to track your money and when to know when to stop.
It kind of seems as though you forced yourself into this financial education space because you put yourself in a predicament that you realize, like, if I don't take care of myself, this could go extremely left. Like the thought that's going through my head is like, okay, you graduate grade school, before you go to university, you're like, I want to go to a couple other countries. Now that's very ambitious in my opinion, but I'm not judging you by any means, but that's very extreme. So I just want to point that out, because you said like, yeah, I went to Thailand and I went here. And it's like, no, those are pretty big feats to do at the age of 18, 19.
Yeah, especially like as a woman on your own. I kind of look back and think, oh my God, I had so much confidence. Like, were my parents not really worried?
You know what? I wasn't gonna say that, but I was gonna say, like, that is very dangerous. Especially, I mean, I guess it depends on how you travel, where you stay, and stuff like that. It can be dangerous, but yeah, especially as a single woman, you're not traveling with bodyguards. It's just you, and with at least with today's day and age, with the trafficking going on and stuff like that. I don't know if I would suggest it, but hey, you did it, and you're here on the podcast today, so it worked out.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to go too far into this business, because I know that you've talked about it plenty. But so you started an online business at 16. You're making and selling jewelry. Where did you learn? Because it can be very simple. When, let's say, I used to cut grass, so I knew that the lawnmower I owned, and I could go cut the grass, and I'd use $3 in gas, and the rest was profits, right? Starting an online business, you're buying materials. You're making jewelry. I assume you're shipping out jewelry. You're buying tables to do local sales. These are a lot of expenses to take track of and to kind of run like a profit and loss system. So how did you learn that process? Was there somebody along guiding you? Was it your parents, or did you learn that from someone else? Because that's a pretty early age to kind of buckle down and learn that stuff.
So I think part of it was myself, and part of it was definitely my dad as well. I would always kind of lean on him for advice, and like I've got a really good relationship with my dad, and he's very careful with money, and I often kind of lean on him. And like when I'm going like investing, I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to invest in this. Like, what do you think? Like, we do have that conversation. With the business, I am quite creative, and I actually went to a market stall in London and saw some jewelry that I thought was way overpriced, and I thought I could make this at home. So I went home and I made it at home for 20% of what it was like for as a price, and a lot of it was I think I'm quite a curious person. If I don't understand something, I often research it. So I was looking at YouTube, I was reading books about kind of how to start your own business. I was selling on a site called Etsy. So I was learning about people that had started their sites on Etsy, and the advice that they were giving for someone starting out. And very much, I actually, at university, I did business and marketing. So there was always that, how do you market it? How do you make it creative? What kind of images will help sell the jewelry? And then I was doing a spreadsheet on the finances, and I remember my dad helping me out with that as well, and saying, what do you think about this? Like, is this too expensive? he worked in like quarrying, so he knew a lot about material management, and kind of what margins should be. So there was probably a lot there that he shared as well at the time.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that at such an early age that you're able to, because the whole point of capitalism, when we think about it, is like somebody makes a product and they sell it for whatever amount that is that they think they can sell it for. Someone else comes along and say, hey, I can make that product better and sell it for cheaper. And it somewhat becomes a paradox to where at some point it becomes so cheap, so reasonable, so affordable that the competition dries up. So you go to this market and you see like, this jewelry is really nice. I can't afford it. But if I can make it for cheaper, I can also sell it to be affordable. And so you saw an opportunity and you took advantage of it. And I think that's one of the things I like about capitalism is like, it's not just they make it, they sell it, and we have to buy it. Like there's always innovators like yourself, even at the age of 16, that says, I can do that a little bit more efficiently. And you take advantage of it. So your dad is helping you along at 16 get this business started, helping you understand like, okay, if this is your cost, you have to sell it for this amount, and these are ways to market it. You go and you're like, I'm gonna go boom, travel the world, I'm gonna go to Thailand, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go enjoy myself before university. And then you come back and you go to university and you study business, and you really get into like, okay, this is how you market a product, this is how you do this, and this is how you get the business churning more efficiently, I would assume. Is this something that you make a career out of? Do you pivot? Well, let's start with, how did you afford university? Did you save up? I'm not sure how they do it in the UK exactly with student loans. How was that journey?
So in the UK, every year is about 9,000. It used to be 3,000, but when I joined, it bumped to 9,000. And you were given a student loan, so I still pay that today. And everyone gets a student loan. No one in the UK, no one really pays it off, except if you're kind of ultra wealthy. But it's often considered a loan that you don't really see it as debt, because everyone has it. And it gets wiped at a certain age when you get older as well. But it also depends on the financial situation of your parents. So you will get a student loan, which you don't pay back, and that's obviously your university fees. And then you also get a loan to help you in terms of just living. So that will be a rental loan, that will be, your fund money. And I forget how much it is. I think every term you get about between maybe 1,000 to 2,000, but it's actually based on what your parents earn. So if your parents don't earn a lot, you get a much bigger loan. And I think you can get like grants and things as well. So with some people in some situations, they won't have to pay that back. But if your parents earn over a certain amount that is considered, kind of just like normal, then you'll get like a bog standard loan.
Gotcha. So they separate your tuition costs with living costs, food costs, and all that. And so they're different loans. And so you mentioned that they get forgiven at a certain age. Do you happen to know off the top of your head, like what are some of the guidelines for you guys' forgiveness? Because in the United States, there are all these different, there are loan forgiveness programs, and they're also proposing other types of forgiveness programs. So what does it look like in the UK for forgiveness?
To be honest, I would have to double check, but I think it's about 60. But in the UK, there is this, there's kind of this feeling that you don't truly pay off your actual student loan. You just pay off the interest, because the loan is so high interest. So you could be paying off, and actually over the course of the year, depending on what you're paid, you might never pay it off. I believe that if you earn under 16K, no, I think it's 24K. If you earn under 24K, you won't pay student loan. And then after 24K, there are certain margins where you'll pay X amount. And then if you earn this amount, you'll pay a higher amount. So it's very dependent on what you earn. But if you earned under 24K your whole life, you would never actually pay a penny of that student loan.
Gotcha. So at around 65, around retirement age, the loan is
Yeah.
forgiven.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that right before you got the lucky timing of before you joined, it went from 3K to 9K. And you
Yeah,
said that was per year, per semester?
per year. Yeah.
So per year.
Yeah, so there's 9K for 3 years, and then I did an internship for a year, and you still had to pay, I think, about 1K for that, even though you weren't actually at the university.
Gotcha. So just for like tuition, let's call it tuition costs, you're at $36,000 in loans for the full degree, the full
Yeah.
4 years, 3 years of education, and 1 year for internship. Well, that is relatively cheap compared to the United States,
Yep.
but I can see why, because they're actually, the money is really made on the interest payments done over your lifetime instead of the actual. Okay, so you know what? That's not too bad. So, and then so you had $36,000 in loans graduating. Was there anything else that you took out for like living expenses and stuff like that to compound on?
Yeah, so the living loan I was given is on top of that. So I've got 36K and then probably about 9K on top of that was like the living loan. I was very fortunate in that because I was on the lower end of the loan, my parents paid for my rent. So if they didn't pay for my rent, my whole living loan would have gone. So they paid for the rent, and then what I was given, I lived off. And that was very feasible at that time. But also, I think when you go to university, it's the first experience that you deal with people managing their money. You don't obviously really experience that at school, but when you start dealing with money, and there would be some people that would just blow it straight away, because every term you would get that term's loan sent to you. So you might get 1,000 every term, and some people could blow that within weeks. And then they would get a job, or they would kind of live off other means. They might get money from their parents, but you could kind of start to understand people's behaviors and how they were reacting with that money, because it was the very first time. And I remember when I would get it, I would put it in like a savings account, and then I would give myself a weekly allowance based on how many weeks it would last me.
Do you understand how much discipline that takes, Matilda? Because you keep saying these things.
I mean, it was hard. Like
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. There was definitely times when I would blow my budget. I would go on a night out and spend, £150, and I'd kind of budgeted about £20. There was definitely lessons. I think there's always been times, like I've never actually been properly in debt, but there have been times when naturally I would go into kind of my current account where you've got a certain amount, but I would always pay it back within time. But there were times when I was like, oh, I shouldn't have spent this much, but it never got really bad.
So what you're saying is you'd go over budget, but you would never go into a deficit.
So when you go to university, the banks give you a student account, so you can go into deficit and it would be interest free. So I think they said the max amount they could give me was about £3,000, and I was like, do not give me £3,000. I'm not going into that. So I think I set it at like £500, so I could go into that, because I knew that would be feasible to put back. But I mean, I knew some people that would use the whole 3,000, and then they would open up another bank account and use 3,000. And I had friends paying that back, way like 2-3 years after university finished.
Gotcha. So yeah, holy cow. So that's a crazy concept to think that, in the UK, they allow you to do that. It's kind of like opening up credit cards, essentially, where you open it up, max it out, except there's no interest. It's just a bank account.
And that student deficit was based, again, on how much your parents earned. A lot in university, things were very dependent on what your parents earn. And I feel like that's a bit of a crazy concept in itself as well, that yes, you can go into 3,000 worth of debt because we kind of know that your parents would bail you out, which, you know, not all the parents would. And it's quite, you know, it's putting it on them a lot. And even in the UK, I mean, we have crazy house prices, and a lot is dependent on deposits. And those deposits dependent often on your parents. I feel there's a lot of things that are very dependent on what situation your parents is in, which you shouldn't be. It should be about you and your financial independence.
Yeah, you know what? That's such a great concept, because it's kind of the same way here, where a lot of grants and a lot of scholarships are not offered depending on what your parents do, and it's kind of not fair, because there are some parents that say, "Hey, look, after 18, whatever you do in college is your choice. You need to figure it out." And so, basing on their income and things like that, it kind of sucks. Um, Using their ability to pay to represent you. So you go into these student loans. It sounds like you're over $50,000 in student loans when you graduate, between the tuition, living costs, and all that. And the system there is just it's so it's so incomparable to here that I can see why you guys aren't too focused on paying it off, because it is like guaranteed forgiven at retirement, and you cover the interest payments. So, were there any other things, because you're obviously living on less than you make, you're giving yourself an allowance, which, again, you keep saying it like it's all nonchalant and it's normal, but people don't normally do that, especially in the United States. They're more towards as soon as I get the money, I need to get rid of it, spending it, buying things. So you already know how to save money. You already know how to give yourself an allowance, live on less than you make, and these student loans, you know that you're going to be able to manage the payments. Were there any money mistakes that you were making around that time when you were in university, like credit card debt, or anything along those lines?
So I've just turned 27, and I got a credit card a year ago. So I didn't actually have a credit card in university. But I think, looking back, one thing that I probably regret is, and I think it's very common when you're in your early 20s, and something that I'm very, very against now, but the term keeping up with the Joneses. And I read a quote the other day where it was like, don't keep up with the Joneses because they're broke as well. And I think when I was at university, I really wanted to keep up with what people were wearing, and, like, the latest kind of designer and things like that. And I couldn't afford designer, definitely couldn't. But I would buy maybe like one or two, and actually I shouldn't have, and I went into my savings. And at university, you are surrounded by so many people in so many different situations financially. So you will get people from ultra, high net worth background, to people that, have come from kind of like council estates and lived very much on the breadline and are very careful with money. But I think there was a lot of trying to prove yourself with certain items, and like luxury items, and something that I'm very against now. And I could probably talk about kind of, Instagram. And I think for people my age and younger, we have grown up in that social media era. And it is like Instagram, I don't see as a photo app, I see as a lifestyle app. It's very much, this is the lifestyle, like this is my lifestyle, and it's not. It's very edited, and you have picked those pictures for a reason. And I see a lot of people around me of, at my age but younger, that are kind of still trying to prove that. We'll put up a picture of a designer bag that they brought, and you know what salary they're on, and you know that their credit card statement will probably be very hefty. But it's still trying to prove that this is the lifestyle, and a rich lifestyle. And I think Instagram has probably really honed in on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that most people look at Instagram as a lifestyle app, to where they're seeing, everything that's going on in someone's life. But really what it is, and as people learn this, they tend to get away from that keeping up with the Joneses. But Instagram, places like Instagram are really just a highlight app. I'm showing you the best parts of my life. So it's either you're looking at it as this is my life all the time 100%, or this is the top 10% of my life. And when you realize that you're just looking at the top 10% and there's another 90% that you don't see of the day-to-day, you get grounded in your feet to say like, these guys are doing awesome, but most people are not showing the other 90%. So I think that is really, really important to learn. And I think it's something that we need to continue to teach each other. It's like, even though I look good on Instagram, like you don't realize that I had to work 14 hours yesterday just to, pay for this, or I had to do this. So yeah, I 100% agree with you that places like Instagram, although they can be great inspirations, they can also be great sources of envy for people. And it gives them that keeping up with the Joneses mentality, like he bought this, so I need to buy this. Well, you didn't see that he took out a payday lender to buy this and things like that. So I 100% agree with you. So at what point did you realize that, like, you know what? I need to learn how to invest. I need to learn how to grow my money. Because you always knew how to save, which I think saving is half the battle. Like that is, I think that is majority of the battle. So where did you realize like, okay, I think it's time for me to start learning how to invest my money to have it grow for me?
So after university, I started a role. It was a graduate scheme. And that's when I started having my first like salary. And then I think from there I started saving. I was very lucky where I was renting wasn't actually too much. It was a shared house. It was lower rent than average. And then I would say investing is still a relatively new thing to me. It's probably been about 3 years. So when COVID hit, I was like, you know what, I've got quite a bit of savings, and it's just sitting there and nothing's happening. I was like, it's not like I'm growing in terms of I'm putting that savings away, but I need to kind of see it grow faster. And when COVID hit, obviously the market was a bit volatile. It wasn't performing very well, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna learn more about investing. Naturally, people working from home, I wanted to kind of educate myself more, and that's when I started to get into investing. So it must have been about 2-3 years ago, and I've been investing ever since. And I think I always say to friends that with investing, the thing that are in your 20s, you have time to watch that money grow. And I hear so many people that are a lot older that are like, oh, I should have started investing young, because you need that time. With investments, it's kind of putting it into for a minimum of 5 years and watching it grow. So I thought I need to start at a young age.
Gotcha. So let's take a step back for a second. So you say you get your first job, you start earning your first salary, you already start saving. So you're already living on less than you make. You're living in a shared home. Was this out of necessity, meaning I can't afford anything else, or was this a choice? So like, even though I may be afford to live on my own, I know that I can save so much money by living in like a shared situation.
So because I just finished university, it was probably that I didn't want to live on my own. I'd been used to living with lots of people, but also it was a very like entry level job, so I couldn't have afforded to live on my own as well. And I lived with other people that were on the graduate scheme. And I have always given myself an allowance. So you get paid from the company that you're working at, and then I pay myself. And I've done that since I started. And my salary over the years has increased by quite a bit, but actually what I pay myself has only really increased by about 10-20%. So there's so much opportunity there where I have been able to save and then invest. And naturally, as you kind of develop and you move along the career ladder, I've been able to, so I now rent by myself, because I'm able to do that. But yeah, back then I wouldn't have been able to.
Gotcha. So it was kind of both. It's like
Mm,
you couldn't afford to live on your own, but you really didn't want to either because you're like,
yeah.
it's a pretty scary step. I'll say for myself, I was a little scared to live on my own. I got to pay rent,
Mm,
electricity, all that stuff. And also you're coming from a university environment where I'm sure you also lived with other people in university. So this wasn't like a foreign concept to you. It was not a very difficult transition. Does that sound about right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's such an awesome tip for the listeners, especially if they are still in college or going to university. It's like a lot of people that it seems as though they're racing for independence, right? The reason
Mm,
that you go to college is so you can get a good job, you can support yourself. And while that is something that I commend everyone strive for, I think that there are baby steps in order to get there.
mm,
So jumping out, just getting your own place right off rip, it might not be the best financial or mental capacity. You might not have the financial or mental capacity to do that. So taking the baby steps, getting into a new career, that is already hard in and of itself. So if you want to live with other people while you get situated in your career, there is nothing wrong with that.
mm,
Matilda did it. I kind of did it somewhat. It wasn't by choice, but I probably would have done it being in the military. But once you get into that position, once you get situated into that and your career begins to become stabilized, then it's time to take risks in other area of your life, like living on your own and doing that. So you don't have to just jump out into the world and get punched from all sides. You can ease out there and yeah, just ease into it instead of just jumping right in. So I love to hear that that's kind of the approach you took of easing into it, easing into the career, getting situated, then
mm.
easing your own living situation. I think that's awesome, Matilda. So you mentioned the 2020 crash. So you started investing after the crash of 2020 due to COVID, or was it before?
So it's just so COVID, we went into lockdown in March, and that's when I invested. So it was when, yeah, stocks were pretty low. Um, and where I was at that time in terms of the job, I was in a job that did very well in COVID. And I kind of knew it was going to be going well. I think naturally you kind of have to assess the environment that you're in and are you ready to invest? And for me, I always say to people, only invest what you can afford to lose because you don't want to go into your investment. So the first thing is have emergency savings. If you are going to lose your job, you've got that 3 months worth of salary, so you've got that savings, and then invest. Because if you don't have that emergency savings and something happens, you will end up taking that investment out and you'll be losing it. You need to keep that money in and know that you're not going to touch it. So I always say have kind of that savings first and then start investing.
Gotcha. So you jump right in, kind of. I would call it that's like the into the black swan event where the
Mm.
world is on fire and you're like, haha, time to get in, baby.
Yep.
Let's do this. So how how like where did you get the education to take that first step and what was your initial strategy when you actually started investing?
So when I started investing, I knew nothing about investing. I was very comfortable and confident that I could save X amount of money, like that was fine. But in terms of investing, I really didn't know much about it. And I leaned again on my dad a lot. So he's invested for as long as I've known. So did my grandpa. And I use for a majority of it, I use Vanguard. So I use kind of different portfolios and very much about obviously having diversifying and making sure that if one is doing pretty bad,
It's
the other
okay.
one is doing well. So a lot of it was from my dad, and even now when I'm looking at investments, I'm like, I think I'm going to invest this amount of money. I will always go to him and kind of get his advice. And I know that I am in a very fortunate position to do that. And I think this is kind of where it stemmed of my financial Instagram is we're not all fortunate to have people like that. And especially at school, you don't get taught any of this. And it's the same with politics. You don't get taught politics. And when you finish school, you often vote for the person running that your parents vote for, and you often have the same money habits that your parents have because that's what you've known. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not, but you haven't been given that financial freedom and education at school. So for me, I've learned from various books, from various podcasts, from online, but also from my dad. And that's where, I try and use my financial Instagram to share that.
What you just said is absolutely amazing, because even though we kind of just beat up on Instagram earlier a little bit, we kind of hit it with a 1-2 of its negatives. We also have to acknowledge the positives of places like Instagram, Twitter, and things like that, because now information and inspiration is at the fingertips of everyone. And so without that, me and you would have never met. This is a platform to where if you surround people that are doing with you what you want to be doing, it's a lot easier to become like them. So although Instagram may be a highlight reel for some and it can have negative impacts, it can also connect people and give you inspiration that you never would have gotten otherwise. And so even those who do not have a financially literate parents, now we have Matilda's page where Matilda's teaching us how to open up an investment account, or James's page on how to purchase their first home, and all of these things that would not have been available to us otherwise. So shout out to Instagram. I know we bopped you up a little bit, but I love it. And if you use it properly, it's a tool. If you use the tool properly, it will get the job done. If you use a hammer to screw in a screw, it's not going to work, and you're just going to end up hurting yourself.
And you're very much responsible for how you use Instagram. Like you can create that feed to how you want. And if you're following someone that is very flashy and actually doesn't make you feel very nice about your own finances, unfollow them, mute them. You don't have to see that. And if you want to learn something about finance or current affairs, politics, you can follow people that will digest that for you. But it's up to you how you want your Instagram to look.
Yeah, I love that. Nobody's forcing you to absorb any of their content. They're putting it out there, and whatever you take in, you take in. Matilda, can you talk a little bit about because when you started investing, again, it's like a black swan event. You see blood in the streets and you decide, now's the time to take advantage. How much of that confidence do you attribute to having such a good financial footing? Because you talked about having a very consistent savings rate, and you talked about being very confident in your employment at the time to say, like, I don't foresee myself losing my job within the next 3 to 6 months. So how much of that weighed on your decision to begin investing at that time?
I think a lot. Yeah, a lot definitely weighed on it. I always said that I have to have that emergency fund until I start investing. And, some people may disagree with that. And I think a lot of people, especially in their 20s, are put off by investing because they're like, oh, well, I don't have enough savings, or I don't have money for a deposit for a house yet, so I'm not going to invest. But, I think start young, and you don't have to have a huge amount to invest. You can put in, a certain amount each month. You can put in a lump sum, but the key thing is to just get started young, because the time is the most valuable, and then start putting in what you can afford, and obviously put in what you can afford. And I say a few people, and I talk about being in your 20s, but I think being in your 20s, people often think, oh, it's kind of a time that I'm a bit skint. I'm obviously going out a lot. I don't really have a lot of savings. That's for when I'm much later. And actually, you have a lot of advantages being in your 20s. You don't have dependents. You probably will, a lot of people in their 20s or early 20s won't have a husband, a child. They won't have mortgage repayments, and you can use that time to start putting a bit away in investments, because you don't have all of that yet. And you can be a bit more take a bit more risks at that time as well.
Yeah, I love it. I think I absolutely agree with you. It's like that is the time to be the most risky, because let's be honest, if you're 24 and all your bills are paid and you lose $1,000 in the market, you have umpteen years to recover compared to if you're 45, 55, you're nearing retirement, you're not going to be able to take as many risks as you would have otherwise.
Mm.
So, and I just want to point out another thing that you said that's super duper important. It's like, it truly does not matter where you start. It doesn't matter if you start with $100. It doesn't matter whether you start with $5. It just matters that you started. It is going to always go up as long as you start. So I like to tell people, like, it truly doesn't matter where you start. It really just matters that you start. So I love that you pointed that out. And I think that that is a really, really good takeaway for those who may be listening who just haven't started. They might be saying, Matilda, I can truly only afford $5 a month in investing. We're telling you, do that $5. I promise you're going to find another $5 at some point to add on. Then it's going to be 10. And then you're going to find another 10. And it's going to be 20. And it's going to compound just like your returns. But it cannot compound if you never start with that $5. So
Yeah, exactly. You've got to start somewhere.
gotcha. So how does investing in the UK, how is it? And I'm gonna give you a little context. That's a pretty broad question. So I thought when I started investing that I needed $100,000 in assets. I needed to go to a bank and get a financial advisor and pay them $3,000 in order to have them look at my finances and help me invest, to help me, multiply my money, and all these misconceptions when it comes to investing. It's investing is such a broad term. And then you break it down, you get into this personal finance space and you realize, like, it literally, I can open up my phone, I can download an app, I can put my information in, and within minutes, I can buy my first stock and be investing. All in all, it takes 10 minutes to get started. Is it the same in the UK or is it a little bit more difficult? I know you mentioned Vanguard, which is super duper easy. What is your experience with the UK and the difficulty level of someone to just get started?
Yeah, so it's similar. It's really easy in the UK. So you've got, like Vanguard, AJ Bell, the kind of the big firms, and then you've got also other companies that have got more, like, they're a lot slicker in terms of the app. So we have Free Trade, which is a really easy app to use, and they actually do a referral where if you want to get started, you can have a code and you get a free share, and that can be between, I think it's like £2 to £200, and that's like a good way to get started. You might have brought a couple of shares, and then you also get a free one. And a lot of my friends use Free Trade. I'd say that a lot of them often go to Free Trade, and then when they get a bit more kind of comfortable and confident, they'll look at places like Vanguard and AJ Bell. But we get a 20,000 ISA allowance, so that's tax free. And then there are, you can put it in stocks and shares. I often do a lifetime ISA. I don't know if you have that in the US. I don't.
I'm not familiar.
No.
You said it's a $20,000. What exactly? What is it?
So it's tax free. So I do like a lifetime ISA, which is you can put it towards like your pension, or if you're buying a house. So it's like you can get a government bonus as well. So you put in a max of 4,000 into that ISA, allowance, and then you get $1,000 on top of that every year, and that is part of that ISA allowance. And that can help towards a pension. It can help towards your house up to a certain amount, and then you think, okay, you've used that 4,000, and then you can use that 16,000 you've got left over to put in, say, stocks and shares.
Okay, so is this like money from the government that they give you guys, or how does that work? Where does the money come from? Or I'm a bit confused. How does someone get that $20,000 in the UK?
So it's just like you don't get it. It's more, you can use 20,000 of your own money and it will be tax free. So I could put in, say, 4,000 into stocks and shares, and then when I wanted to take it out, that wouldn't be taxed.
Gotcha. So okay. So
sorry, the government don't give us 20,000.
Yeah, I'm gonna relate it back
I'd love
to
that.
I'm going to try and relate it to the United States. We have retirement accounts called like a 401k. I'm not sure if the UK has it, where you put in money and it is tax deferred, meaning you don't pay income taxes on it. And it can grow into that count to whatever amount it is, and you don't pay taxes, or you pay taxes on it when you pull it out. What you're basically saying is you get that money, you put it in there tax-free, it grows tax-free, and the first 20,000 you get is also tax-free. Is that right?
So you get 20,000 that you can use a year.
A year.
So every year,
so it's basically a
every year
401k.
Yeah,
because ours is like 19,500, I think, this year that you can put in without taxes. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. And we have the same thing for Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, where you can put in 6,000 per year. If it's Roth, you pay taxes on it now, and you don't pay taxes later. With a traditional, you pay taxes now, or you don't pay taxes now, and you pay taxes later. But it sounds like for you guys, you don't pay taxes now, and you don't pay taxes later.
Yeah, and then the lifetime ISA is very much about the government bonus. So that 1,000 that I mentioned, that will come from the government, and you will get that 1,000 if you went to buy your house. Whereas the stocks and shares is very much you put your money in and tax free.
Gotcha. So these are the
kind of schemes,
investment vehicles that you're using in order to get into the market.
Yes, yeah. So I use the stocks and shares allowance, and then the lifetime ISA is the main two that I use.
Gotcha. And so without getting in, you don't have to tell me the exact funds you're doing, but what are the asset classes that you're investing in? Are you investing in just stocks, American companies, international companies, or what is kind of your forte? Are you an index fund gal? What's your philosophy?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mix. So with Vanguard, it's very much, like FTSE 100, FTSE 250, a lot of different there. Probably can't list all the top of my head. And then free trade is very much, rather than obviously a group of companies, it is just like individual shares. So you might buy in Colgate or Walmart, but there isn't those kind of index funds.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it's very similar. It's very similar to the United States. It's very similar in getting started, to where there aren't that many hurdles anymore to getting started, but also what vehicle you use to invest in and what you invest in seems pretty similar on almost all fronts. And so about how much of your monthly income, not dollar amount, but like percentage wise, are you able to invest on a monthly basis, or are you even focused on that? Like, are you focused on something else?
So at the moment, I think last month was between about 30 to 40% was savings of my monthly income. I always have kind of some short-term goals and like long-term. Short-term at the moment, and I've spoken about this actually a lot on my financial Instagram, is recession. So it's something that, obviously may happen. Interestingly, I actually put a poll on the other day and said, are people kind of aware what a recession is? 96% of the participants said that they didn't really know what a recession was, or kind of knew a little bit. So a lot of the content that I've been doing at the moment is very much about recession. What is it? How can you prepare for yourself, individually? And one of those is my emergency fund. So my emergency fund, like I mentioned, is about 3 months worth of my salary. At the moment, I've decided that I'm going to increase that by 4 times. And then I'm going to look at investments. Investments this year, I've been a little bit hesitant. So I've got the money there. And I'm kind of reviewing and thinking, am I going to hold off a bit, and looking at kind of where to invest. But my main focus has just been kind of building that for the now. The reason being is, and it goes back to childhood, I think, is when we had the 2008 financial crash. As a child, I think just children are very kind of aware of what's going on and the surroundings, and they do pick up things. And I remember when there was the 2008 financial crash, and my parents were saying, we need to be a bit more careful, and we're saving this for a rainy day. So we need to kind of be a bit more mindful. And I think because of that, I've always kind of, when I've been planning finances, always prepared for the worst in terms of savings. So at the moment, with the recession, what's the worst thing that can happen in terms of financially and with job? Worst thing is that you lose your job and actually loads of other people do, and it's going to be a really tough market, and potentially the hiring could take longer. Not saying that that's going to happen, but it's just more about thinking of the worst case scenario. And for me, it goes back to, I never want to take money out of my investments. Like that's the worst thing. I need to be comfortable and leave it in there. So short-term goal is increasing that from 3 to 4 times, and then looking at kind of where to invest. And with the market where it is at the moment, I think naturally people become a lot more cautious, but really actually see it as an advantage, because where can you kind of, because you're thinking about it long term, you could get some things that are very, very low, and in 5 years it could kind of be back to where it is in a normal state maybe that it was last year. So definitely I wouldn't say that I'm being cautious of I'm not going to invest. It's just I'm seeing kind of where things are planning out, and then I will invest this year.
Okay, so what is your plan after beefing up your emergency fund to basically a year worth of your salary, it sounds like?
Yeah, so I will look and research. I'll kind of read. I will have a conversation more with different people. At the moment, I'm thinking about investing. Should I invest safe? When I talk about safe, is thinking if a recession happens, what kind of companies are going to be safe? So I always think about like food. You're not going to live without food. Like everyone's going to buy food. So is it that you would invest in like Tesco here, Walmart there? Discounted shops usually do quite well in a recession because naturally people want to save money. So you might look at B&M here. Household goods usually do quite well. I mentioned like Colgate, tobacco, alcohol, that usually does well. Interestingly, alcohol sales in the 2008 crash remained the same than like a normal period. So I think there's 2 ways. There's do you take a risk and see could this pay off, or do you look at more companies that are in a bit more risk averse and are quite comfortable and will probably do quite well in a situation like that? But I am very much thinking worst case if a recession happens.
Gotcha. And I like to point out is like when you tell me that financial plan, I always think okay, what is the absolute worst thing that can happen if Matilda decides to beef up her emergency fund from 3 months to 12 months? The absolute worst that can happen is she has more money. Like you're not beefing up your spending, you're not consuming more of your income. You're taking a more conservative approach. And so when I look at it that way, it's like, I mean, literally, what's the worst that can happen? And once you have that money, now you're able to take advantage of all of the opportunities that may come with a recession. If a crash happens even more, you can take advantage of that because you have more capital. If real estate ends up crashing, you have capital to take advantage of that. So I am still systematically investing, but I have no problem with people who are saying like, I'm still going to systematically invest a little bit, but I'm definitely going to beef up, my cash fund to be able to take advantage of opportunities and weather storms, whichever one may come first. So I think
just on the emergency fund, sorry, I'm going to increase it from 3 months to 4 months. So it wouldn't be 12 months because I want to start obviously using that money towards like investing. But I think as well, it's because I've moved into a place on my own, it's probably made me a little bit more cautious as well when you're not relying on kind of someone else. So maybe, if I was living with someone else, with a partner, you'd probably be a little bit more riskier. I'm not sure, but it's very much, again, the environment, the surroundings that you're in, and making that kind of calculated decision.
Yeah, gotcha. So, okay, so you're just increasing your savings, your emergency savings by 1 month.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you said 3 to 4 times, and so I'm sorry, I
Oh,
messed that
sorry. I
up.
think I meant like 3 to 4 times my salary. Sorry.
Gotcha. You meant from 3 to 4, not I'm going to increase it 3 times or 4 times. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
that's my bad. I'm way ahead. But either way, I mean, I don't care. Like, I'm never gonna tell somebody like, "Hey, you're saving too much money. You know, you got to slow down. You need to go buy a new car or something." So I think that's awesome. And it kind of goes back to what you talked about earlier, which was investing from a secure financial position. When
Mm,
someone is just trying to make money to survive, it is a much different interaction and a much different conversation than someone who is already surviving and now they have this extra money to play with, because if they lose it, they're going to survive either way. So I promise you, honestly, no problem in what you're
mm.
doing.
And I think, having savings, but knowing, that 3 to 4, yes, you're comfortable with, but you don't want to have too much in a savings. Like I always think, if you've got a ridiculous amount just sitting there in a savings account, with inflation, you are losing money.
Mhm.
So investing is, I would say, is the better choice. Because if you've got kind of 30, 40K sitting in there and inflation is at, I think, 9.1%. Yeah. So I'd always say, invest if you can, and if you've got a small amount and you want to start putting in small amounts, but just to start.
Gotcha. Yeah, I 100% agree. And then something you talked about way earlier in the podcast, I don't want to dwell too far on, but I scrolled up and I had to hit on it. You said that you talk about finances with your parents much
Mhm.
more now than you did back in the day. So, are these conversations about your finances, or are you talking to them also about their finances and maybe ways that they might, some things they may consider to optimize their position as they approach retirement?
Yeah, so it's probably a mix. I'd say that they're probably a little bit more reserved, and I think that's just how they were growing up. Whereas I think probably myself, I am a bit more open, and that's just like a generational thing as well. But they've retired now, so my dad has been very good in terms of, he has like various pension funds, and that we talk a little bit about kind of theirs in terms of retirement and future, and sometimes a little bit depressing future state. But a lot, I'd say, I talk a little bit about finances to them, not like a massive amount. I was thinking about kind of buying a house, so I spoke to them about that and kind of the financial situation. And I remember actually when I was for the first time, I said, "Oh, I think I might consider buying somewhere." And I showed my dad my financial spreadsheet, and he was like, "What the hell?" Because he was just so shocked, and he was like, "Whoa, like this is all like." This is perfect. You can kind of see, where you've got various savings, investments, how you're budgeting, where you've got your short-term, your long-term goals, where you've like adjusted it. So I might say, oh, I'm spending too much on this month, and I very much, track my spending. So we talk about it a little bit, but I wouldn't say we talk about finances a huge amount.
Gotcha. Well, and the reason I asked that is it seems as though you know much more about their finances than the average person. Like, you know that, okay, they have multiple pension funds, and you know that you know more about their retirement. So do you have any tips for those people who their parents are maybe nearing retirement and they're learning about all this personal finance stuff, and they just want to make sure, like, I want to make sure my parents are good in retirement,
Mm.
so the conversation has to be had. Do you have any advice for those who maybe want to approach their parents and talk about finances just to ensure that they're okay?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, like where we have had conversations, it hasn't really been about their pension fund. It's always started of, um, I want to think about increasing my pension. Like, what does this mean? Like, and we have a conversation, and I say, like, what happened when you were working, and what did you do? And the other day I was saying, oh, I'm going to group all my pension funds together, because I'm kind of with various different pension funds. we were having a conversation about that, and then it led to how they did it. So I think it wasn't necessarily what do you do? It's more about learning. And I think if you are curious and you're thinking about the future, ask those questions and, what did they learn from it? Because I think a lot of it as well is the advantage that your parents have is they've probably made some mistakes, and they've also, really done well in other areas, and kind of just learning from what they've gone through. And I think especially when you get to a position where you are thinking about where to put this money, or how do I like build wealth, what do I think like long-term plan, and one of them is a great example is pension. For me, like I put in a max amount in my pension. I think I put in like 8%, and my company puts in 12%. That's 20% a year. And I'm like, that's amazing. But for most people my age, they're like, well, that's going to be in 40, 50 years time. Why would I think about that? Because that's so far in the future. But when you get to that state and you haven't thought about these things, you are going to be regretting it. And I very much like live the concept of, well, I'm living in the here and now, and I could get hit by a lorry any day. So, it might not matter. But if it matters and you get to that age, you're going to be in a situation where you might have kind of just state pension, which isn't enough to live off of, probably of what you've been earning. So, I think it is setting yourself up now and learning from people that have kind of gone through that.
Yeah, I love it. I love the advice of like, bring your situation to them and let them induce their wisdom. Let them tell you about their experiences, and you're gonna get somewhat of an idea of, are they okay? Just from how they give you advice based on your current situation.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the whole, living for now, and I'm okay with that concept, but my my philosophy is like, I would rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, because the last thing I want to do is be 70 years old trying to work to survive. I mean, that's just, if I get hit by a bus today, you know what? Hey, that goes on to my children, it goes on to my wife, it goes on to people to help them. There really is no downside. Like, so
I think as well, people think that getting rich is really hard. And actually, there's a few key principles that if you do, you will build that wealth. And I think, sometimes people think that, if I'm in a different financial situation, or I'm not earning kind of this amount, I'm not going to get rich. What's the point? I'm always going to be at this level. But there's a few things that you can just like, few little changes, and one of them is obviously spending less than you earn, budgeting. When you budget, really looking at where you can kind of potentially make savings. If you have budgeted and you realize that you just don't earn enough, looking at, okay, how do I increase my income? Looking at things like taking advantage of ISA allowances, pension and pension contributions that your work gives you. And these are things that are, I think, quite kind of simple, basic principles that you can start doing. And that's what's going to build you wealth. But a lot of people, like you said, are very much in the here and now. And a big thing to me is sacrifices. So there can be someone that goes out for work drinks every time and will never say no, and they will eat out most weeks, and they will buy the latest iPhone, and they will, do this. And if you don't make the sacrifices, you're not going to end up saving the money. And those sacrifices are the things that are going to, pay off in the future, and even pay off straight away. And the other day I picked my friend up, and she was just like chuckling to herself. She's laughing to herself. And I was like, what? And she's like, you're still in that Ford Fiesta. And I've had that Ford Fiesta since I was 18. So yeah, I've had it for about 9 years. She's like, why don't you treat yourself and just like get a new car? I was like, why would I get a new car? Like, it works. It gets me from A to B. I don't need a new car. I don't want to go on a, financial plan, because I have a car there that worked perfectly. And it goes back to the Instagram of having, looking like you've got the best. But those little small sacrifices, and the money savings is ultimately what is going to be how you build that and how you think about it, like long term as well.
Yeah, I like to relate it because what you're talking about isn't just finances. This can literally be related to every single aspect of your life.
Mm,
You know, it might be hard today. It might sacrifices today. You might not benefit today. You might not benefit tomorrow, but you might benefit in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and the benefits will compound. You can use this for exercising. If I go to the gym today and I do 20 crunches,
mm,
I'm not going to see a six pack tomorrow. But if I
yeah,
do it every single day for the next 5 years, I'm going to be thanking myself. It's the same thing with marriage. If you might have to make some sacrifices today, but if it's going to cause happiness in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that's what you should be living for. I think with times being so uncertain, there's so many things going on in the world right now. A lot of people are losing hope for the future. They're losing
mm,
hope for that. Even, a lot of people say the United States won't even be around in 10 years, 20 years. I'm like, if you think like that, you are never going to be prepared for when it doesn't happen. So it's
yeah,
like you have to be willing to sacrifice. You have to understand that although it might hurt today, you're not doing it to benefit yourself today. You're doing it to benefit yourself in the next 10, 20, 30, and even generations after you. Because
mm,
I plan on building enough wealth to pass on generations, and I'm sure other people are also doing the same.
hmm.
So, Matilda, you already kind of went over a lot of things you hope to accomplish within the short term, next 6 months to a year. Let's talk about some things you hope to accomplish within the next 5 to 10 years. And what do you think the finish line looks like for you?
Mm. Very good, interesting question. I think long term is obviously building wealth. I was looking at potentially buying a place. I think I'm actually going to buy an investment property. That is more because of the savings and the situation, I can put down quite a nice deposit. So I might look at potentially, getting an investment property. It's also that with buying a house, where I am at the moment, I actually don't see a place like called home. And that's just because I've moved about a bit for jobs and I just don't know where I'm going to settle. So I think that's kind of the key thing of keeping on saving. For me, I would like to put down as much deposit as possible. I'd really like to put a high deposit down. I'd really like to be kind of mortgage free. That's like the long-term plan. I would like to build my career, increase my income. I think as a woman in your career, it gets a little bit harder as you get older. So I don't have any children at the moment, but I think when you have children, it is a bit harder to kind of build up the career ladder. You go on maternity, you come back and everything is like a whole year later, and it's just not as flexible. So I would like to get quite high up in my career ladder. And I think just being financially free, like being able to do things and not really kind of worrying too much, and being in a strong financial position. I mean, I think that's probably what everyone wants, but that's where I'd like to be.
Yeah, I have no complaints about that, but I want to go back to something you said because I think it's so powerful in the fact that, they say that the American dream is to own your own home. And
Mm,
although I do agree with that, I think not everybody should own their own home. You just
mm,
admitted that you're moving around, you're trying to be flexible for your career to climb the ladder. And so you're not ready to plant roots. Well, if
yeah,
you're not ready to plant roots, you shouldn't be buying a home. I think that's a very, very wise decision because buying a home isn't a 1 year plan. Buying a
hmm,
home is a 5 year, 10 year, 20 year plan. That's where you see the benefits. It goes right back to sacrificing today. So, Matilda, are you throwing away money renting? Not really. You need a place to live, anyways, but you're just not in a time or you're not in a place that buying is more beneficial than renting. It gives you
yeah,
a lot less flexibility. And that's a great point of like buying an investment property. Like if you that is an investment for the next 5 year, 10 year, 20 year thing, you know. So that is a solid long-term plan. And I love the idea of being mortgage free. I'm not there yet, but at some point I want to also be there. But again, buying an investment property for you is probably a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plan. It's not just a 1-year plan and get out of it. So
Yeah. And I think you touched on it earlier that everyone kind of wants to accelerate to the next step, and they might not be ready for the next step. And I see this a lot with, like you said about the American dream, is everyone feels that they have to own a house, that they have to buy this house immediately. And what they don't understand is kind of the costs that come with it. And I think a lot of people are in such a rush to buy a house that they don't realize that it's not just putting a deposit down, it's the monthly repayments, it's the, building insurance, it's the, if your boiler breaks, do you have enough money for that? It's the interest. And it's also, if you think that you're not going to be there for 2-3 years, or you need a bigger place because you have children, is that the right plan for you? And I think it's very much, it's a lot with finances. Everyone kind of feels like they need to be buying that place, they need to do this, and financially it might just not be as beneficial in that situation.
yeah, I 100% agree. All right, Matilda, we're going to go into the final questions of the podcast. These are the same 4 questions, 5 and 4.5, 4 3/4 questions that I ask every single guest that come on the podcast. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Question number 1. Everyone has their own definition of what it means to have financial peace. What is your definition?
Oh, financial peace. I'm going to say it in 2 parts. So I think for financial peace, the first part is having that positive money mindset, and really understanding and having a healthy relationship with money is the first part. It's recognizing where you need to make changes, understanding your budget, your tracking. And I think that is really the foundations for financial kind of peace and freedom. The second one is, and we spoke about it earlier, but if you are to lose your job, you are actually, yes, it's horrible, but you are in a comfortable position financially. Like you know that it's going to be a stressful time, but you've got the money, you've got the means to be able to do that. And I think that is so key, of like having those savings and knowing that if the worst case scenario happened, it's going to be okay.
That nobody's ever said that before. I want to go back to the first part, because no one has ever touched on having a healthy relationship with money, because there are people out there that think money is the root of all evil, and it's just a big old myth, and we need to just get rid of it. We need to trade fruits back and forth. And if you have that mindset towards money, you will never reach financial peace. You just can't, because it's going to be conflicting. The more money you get, the more you want to get rid of it or do whatever. So I think when people look at money less of as a evil, greedy thing, they think of it as a tool that can be used for good, and it can also be used for evil. I think that will allow you to become peaceful. And I think having an unhealthy relationship with money, especially living in a place like the UK or like the United States, it's not going away. So you're just going to be, until you learn to accept it and to look at the positives that it can create, I think you're going to be living a very miserable life, because everyone around you is going to have more than you, and they're going to be able to do things you can't. And unfortunately, I don't want to live like that. So I really appreciate you pointing out. I think that's the first time we've ever even hit on that portion of like just your mental relationship with money. Question number 2. If there are listeners out there that want to start building wealth and they have no clue where to get started, what would you tell them?
So I think the first thing, and I will shout it from the rooftops every single day, the foundations is budgeting, tracking. The first thing to understand and to build wealth is to actually understand kind of what financial position you're in the first place. And that's learning, what salary are you getting paid, and then what are you doing with it? How much do you spend on rent? How much are you spending on subscriptions, on your like fun money, like I said, on your allowance? And that is, firstly, you need to understand and you need to learn how to budget and how to manage your money. And because of that, and because of having that understanding of I can save X amount, what do you then do with that savings? So, for example, like investing, or understanding that you are spending less than you earn, or because you know that you're doing everything that you can and you've kind of made sacrifices, you've made cuts, you've cut down on a subscription, you've lowered your phone bill, you've lowered your car insurance, you've done everything that you can, and you think that you're in a good financially, but actually you still need more. Okay, how do you increase your income? But fundamentally, that first part you need to get right, and that is budgeting and understanding where the money's going. And when you understand that, you can start thinking, okay, what's next?
You can't manage it if you don't know what's coming in and what's going out.
Yeah, yeah.
It's impossible. It's truly impossible. So yeah, no pushback from me on that. When I 100% agree, it's like, it is the foundation. You won't build the house on sand. If your foundation is shifty, if you don't know what's coming in and going out, there's just no possible way to manage it. Question number 3. If there's one thing you could advise everyone to avoid doing to build wealth, what would that be?
Again, I feel like we've spoken about it, but keeping up with the Joneses. You don't need the latest iPhone, you don't need the latest designer bag or the latest car. And again, it links to sacrifices. And I think that we are very much, we try and kind of show off, but I think sometimes people find that showing off financially is showing that luxury item, but the rich people aren't showing their luxurious items. And it's things like designer brands like Gucci aren't marketing to rich people, they're marketing to people that want to look rich. And there's a term that I think they use at luxury brands like Gucci, where they're very much, how do we kind of market it to these people? So I think it's really assessing, like, do you need that, and do you need these luxury items? And actually, if you make those sacrifices, that will pay off in the future. Like, I'm not going to buy a new car because I don't need a new car, but that money will be towards a house and a deposit. And that, I feel, is an investment, because you will see your money grow. A car isn't really an investment, more often than none, you lose money on it. An iPhone, you lose money on it. So I'd say that that's the main thing. The second thing, that links to that is, if you can pay for it, pay for it. And something that I've always kind of grown up with is, if you can't afford it, don't buy it. So I'll relate, like, the iPhone. My phone broke the other day, actually. Like, it was on its last legs. I'd had it for years. And I went into Apple and I was like, I just want to buy a phone outright. Because if you think about it in terms of a contract, I was like, well, it's going to cost me a lot more in the long term. And I was able to just buy a phone outright. And they were like, okay, is it the iPhone 13? And I was like, I don't need an iPhone 13. I just need something that takes a few pictures and I can call people. And the same with the car, do you need that latest car, and like car finance, or could you just buy something outright?
Yeah, there's a great saying, which I was trying to think of who said it, but they said it and it blew my mind. They asked, would you still buy it if you knew no one would ever see it? And it goes to your example of the Gucci bag. Like, would you buy that if you knew it was going to sit in the top of your closet and no one would ever know you had it? If the answer is no, you don't need to buy it. Same thing with cars, same thing with shoes and all these other things. And so it's such a great point you made. It's like, keeping up with the Joneses. Like, if you would not buy this, if it does not give a utility to your life to make your life better, and it's not to impress other people, if you would still buy it, then buy it. But if you wouldn't, if no one ever knew you had it and it had to sit in the top shelf of your closet in the back collecting dust, would you buy it? If the answer is no, you just don't need it. Question number 4, Matilda. If there's someone out there that doesn't believe that they can reach financial peace due to their age, race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., what would you tell them to change their mind?
I think this is a really, really hard question. And I think it's also hard because I am a privileged white girl that I mentioned was brought into a middle-class family. So it's very hard to kind of give advice to a situation that you haven't been in. And I think the important thing is to just be aware of, I'm aware of my privilege and the situation. And I always think that, and going back to my financial Instagram, is I try to make it as inclusive as possible and tailor it to different situations that people are in. So, one day I might be talking about, you've got this amount of money, how do you invest? What platforms should you invest on? But the next day I'll be talking about how to save on fuel or how to lower your phone bill. So I really try and tailor my content to different situations. And I think the main thing is being in that money mindset of, if you are willing to think, you know what, I don't think I'm very good with money and I want to learn a bit more about money. That's the first step. And then learning in the different situations and kind of building yourself up from there. So it's, difficult question.
Yeah, but I think you hit on a very, very important point. It's like having that curiosity to say, is it possible for me to become a millionaire? That is a very, very important. The fact that you're asking the question makes me realize that 9 times out of 10 you can do it and you have what it takes.
And I think everyone can start somewhere. It's just having that willingness to want to.
I love that. Matilda, this has been such a great, oh my God, I've learned so much comparing UK finances with United States finances, and it's really not that different. It seems as though no matter where you go in the world, the principles are live on less than you make, track your spending, index funds, and index funds.
Yeah.
Matilda, where can people find out more about you?
So I am on Instagram, a Millennial Saver. And you will see me, at a Millennial Saver.
Gotcha. And of course, guys, I'm going to have that linked in the show notes. You're not going to have to go very far. It'll be down in the show notes. You guys can find that. Make sure you guys go hit a follow on her Instagram. Yeah, Matilda, this has been such an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing all of your journey up to this point and sharing all of your tips. And I really think that listeners, I don't have many UK listeners, but a lot of the things you talk about and a lot of the things that you have brought to the table are 100% useful over in the United States as well as everywhere else in the country or in the world. So I really appreciate you spending the time coming on and telling your story.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is truly all mine. But we're going to sign off, Matilda. I hope you have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
And guys, that was my interview with Matilda. I really hope you guys enjoyed. We talked about all different aspects of her story, from before she was investing, getting started in her career, explaining the retirement account similarities and differences between the UK and here. So it was so enlightening. I love her accent and she's such an awesome person. So I really appreciate her coming on, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed all of the great knowledge that she brought to the table. It's so great to get different perspectives from different people, especially for the listeners who are across the world, who don't have the same opportunities we have in America. Well, we can bring on people like Matilda to share her expertise, because man, is she rocking and rolling in this whole real estate game. All right. But with that being said, guys, if you guys want to get in touch with Matilda, all of her social media and stuff is going to be down in the show notes below, where you can easily get in touch with her. She's awesome. She'll answer any questions you guys have. With that being said, if you guys want to get in touch with me, all of my social media is down in the show notes also. So you guys can find me there. If you want financial coaching with me personally, it's down there. You can check out my website or just listen to other episodes of the podcast. But with that being said, guys, it's time for me to get up out of here. I really appreciate you guys listening. And if you don't mind leaving a review or hitting the subscribe button on YouTube, really, really helps the podcast grow and reach more people. And I'm really here to change lives. But with all that being said, guys, I am your host, James Bowman, and always remember, you're only as secure as your ability to perform. So spend your life accumulating assets that can perform for you. Later, guys.
'Cause you got me holding, holding.